Every evening, my dad sat on his front porch, the one he built with his own two hands, just to feel the breeze and watch the birds. One day, a white man from the HOA said he was making the neighborhood uncomfortable and fined him $250. That's when I packed a bag, brought my legal license, and a camera. I was done letting them disrespect him. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. And why father taught me how to read case law before I ever touched a Barbie. He was a Vietnam vet, retired mechanic, church deacon, and the most peaceful man I'd ever known, unless you messed with his family. And even then, he wouldn't yell. He'd just say, "The truth walks slow, but it gets there." He bought our house in Roseview Estates with cash after decades of working double shifts. It wasn't flashy. 3 bedrooms, brick porch, worn but steady railing. The house had his fingerprints all over it. Literally, he laid the concrete steps himself, painted the door crimson every spring. And that porch, it was his sacred space. Every evening, like clockwork, he'd be out there in his folding chair. Sweatpants, house shoes, cup of sweet tea. He'd nod to the mailman, wave to passing kids. Sometimes he'd talk to himself or hum an old gospel tune under his breath. Nothing loud, nothing disruptive, just a black man aging peacefully in a home he paid for. Until someone decided that was a problem. The first time he mentioned a warning notice, I didn't think much of it. Probably some spam, I said over the phone. HOA likes to scare people. He chuckled. They said I violated the neighborhood quiet standards. I paused. How? Wasn't specific. Just said non-compliant behavior observed repeatedly on porch. That didn't sit right. But he brushed it off, like he always did. It's nothing, baby. I'm not out there bothering anybody. But then the second letter came. $250 fine. Reason, loitering and visual disruption of community standards. Filed by Stephen Aldridge, HOA president. I flew in that weekend. Stephen Aldridge was exactly the man you'd imagine. Mid-50s. White. Khakis tucked into a belt like law enforcement. Crew cut. Pale skin that always looked sunburned. And eyes that didn't blink much. The kind that stare too long. Like they're trying to scan your worth. He didn't wave when I walked past, didn't say hello. Just glanced at my suitcase and went back to pruning his identical bushes. My father greeted me with a tight hug and a soft smile. But his eyes were tired. I didn't want you flying down just for this mess. No, you didn't. But I'm here now. We sat on that porch together. Him in his folding chair, me in one I pulled from the garage, sipping tea like nothing was wrong, even though everything was wrong. The next day, I walked into the HOA office unannounced. IT was one of those prefabricated buildings, beige, over-air-conditioned, with inspirational posters about community harmony on the walls. A receptionist looked up. Do you have an appointment? No, but I have a law degree, and I'm here about a discriminatory fine issued to Mr. Thomas Waverly. She blinked. You're his daughter. Legal counsel. Let's talk. Stephen walked out 5 minutes later, flipping through a folder like he was busy. He didn't expect me to be composed. He didn't expect me to be educated. And he sure didn't expect what came next. I'd like to see the incident report that led to the fine. He adjusted his collar. That's not standard procedure. I'm not asking for standard. I'm asking under Section 3.12 of your own HOA bylaws. Public access to citations and supporting documentation. Unless you'd like me to file a civil motion for denial of due process. His mouth twitched. One moment. He returned with 3 pages. No photos. No timestamps. Just vague wording like perceived loitering, intimidating posture, occupying porch for extended periods. I almost laughed. My father built that porch. Stephen cleared his throat. This isn't personal. Other residents have complained. Show me the complaints. He hesitated. They're anonymous. Of course they were. That night, I set up 2 cameras, point 1 facing the street, point 1 from the bushes across the lawn. I documented everything. For 7 days. My father sitting quietly, never speaking above a whisper. Neighbors passing. Some waved. Some didn't. And then, on day 3, Stephen himself, walking his dog, staring directly at my father, pausing, shaking his head, and making notes on his phone. On day 5, my father wasn't even outside. He had a doctor's appointment. But still, a new warning appeared in the mailbox. Behavior persists. Final notice before property hearing. That was the last straw. The night I got that second citation, warning my dad of an official HOA hearing. I didn't sleep, I just sat by the window with the footage on loop, jaw clenched, fingers twitching on my laptop, watching a grown man in a pressed golf polo walk past an empty porch and still issue a fine. That wasn't about quiet hours. That was about control, and it reminded me of every time growing up that a teacher called my dad aggressive for calmly asking why I got a B when I deserved an A. And it reminded me of the time a police officer followed him home because a man matching his description was reported looking suspicious in the same neighborhood he'd lived in for 27 years. But this time, they messed with the wrong veteran. By sunrise, I had drafted a formal cease and desist letter citing harassment and racial profiling, a pre-litigation complaint prepared for the city's Housing Discrimination Board, a press release addressed to 3 local media outlets. I delivered all 3 to the HOA office before 9:00 a.m. Stephen wasn't there, but his secretary definitely got the message. Her hand was shaking when she took the envelope. That evening, I requested a spot on the HOA board meeting agenda. You could hear the discomfort in their silence when I walked in. 10 people at a long U-shaped table. 8 of them white, 1 Latina, 1 older black man who looked like he'd been voting no alone for years. Stephen was seated at the head like he was running for office. Fake calm. Clip-on leadership. He cleared his throat. We'd like to remind all guests to keep comments respectful and limit time to 3 minutes. I smiled. Don't worry. I'm trained to make my words count. Then I opened my laptop and hit play. The video began. My dad, sitting quietly, waving to neighbors. Long stretches of silence, birds chirping, someone mowing a lawn 2 houses down, Stephen pacing by, looking over, writing in his phone. Then the shot from the 5th day, the one that mattered, in empty porch. A timestamp. And the next frame, a fine slid into the mailbox an hour later. Tell me, I asked the board, turning the screen to face them. Which part of this footage justifies calling an elderly black veteran a threat to neighborhood safety? No one answered. The silence was thick, heavy, shameful. I continued. You fined my father $250 for sitting quietly on property he owns. You filed 2 written citations. You planned a disciplinary hearing. And you never once questioned the man behind the complaints. Because his name is Stephen Aldrich. Because he's the HOA president. Because in this neighborhood, his comfort matters more than my father's presence. Someone shifted in their chair. The older black man nodded slowly. Eyes locked on me. I walked closer. But here's what you didn't expect. You didn't expect his daughter to be a civil rights attorney. You didn't expect her to film you. And you definitely didn't expect her to be willing to sue all 10 of you under Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act. I let it sit, then added, you've got 72 hours to drop the fines, issue a written apology, and revise your reporting process for HOA complaints, or I file. And then I sat down. Stephen tried to talk. This is theatrical. You're blowing this out of proportion. I turned to him. So is threatening a man for existing on his own porch. The meeting ended with more silence. The kind that means they know, but it wasn't over, because the very next day, a neighbor slipped a note under our door. You don't know me, but I've lived here 12 years. I've seen how Stephen treats black families on this block. You're not the first. If you need a witness, I'll speak. Then another came. And another. By the end of the week, I had 5 written statements, 2 anonymous emails, and a voicemail from a woman in tears saying, I wish someone like you had moved in years ago. But the best moment? That Sunday. Dad and I sat on the porch again. I handed him an envelope, certified, from the HOA board. He opened it slowly. Read the letter. All citations withdrawn. HOA protocol under review. Stephen Aldrich placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Dad didn't say anything for a minute. Then he took a slow sip of tea and said, Told you. Truth walks slow, but it gets there. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. You'd think that when the HOA dropped the fines, that would be the end. But I wasn't done. Because if I'd walked away then, I'd just be another story someone whispered over coffee. Remember that time they messed with old Mr. Waverly? Yeah, it wasn't right. And then they'd go back to their lives. No, this time, it was going to mean something. I took the footage, the written statements, the anonymous notes, and sent the entire package to a friend at a local paper. She called me that same evening. This is powerful, she said. Would your father speak on record? I looked across the room. He was in the kitchen, humming softly, slicing peaches for cobbler. Still quiet. Still peaceful. Still proud. I'll ask. He said yes. Not for attention. Not for revenge. But because, as he put it, I want other men like me to know they ain't crazy. The article came out 3 days later. Front page of the Sunday feature section. Veteran fined for sitting on his own porch. Daughter fights back. The image was perfect. My dad in his folding chair, hat on his knee, eyes steady. The caption read, Thomas Waverly, 68, just wanted peace. And suddenly, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Local news. Then regional outlets. Then a rep from the state attorney general's office. Stephen Aldridge's name was now in bold letters across every article. And people started asking real questions. Why had he been president of the HOA for 12 years without rotation? Why were most of his complaints directed at black homeowners? Why were there no oversight procedures in place? Within a week, the HOA board held an emergency session. This time, I didn't attend alone. 2 other black homeowners came with me, ones who had stayed quiet for years. One had been fined for a non-conforming garden. The other had received a citation for too frequent family gatherings. We all spoke, not with rage, with facts. We told our stories, showed the patterns, laid the truth bare. By the end of the night, Stephen was forced to resign. His pale face, usually smug, now looked small, lost. He mumbled something about not meaning harm, but no one was listening anymore. Because the neighborhood had changed. People weren't just watching from their windows. They were showing up. The state housing office launched a formal investigation. 2 more neighborhoods came forward with similar stories about HOAs abusing power under the radar. It was a reckoning, and it started with a porch. My father's porch. But the real victory came 2 months later. The HOA bylaws were amended. Now, all complaints had to be verified by 2 board members, with time-stamped video if available. Fines couldn't be issued without proper documentation, and homeowners had the right to attend any board session involving them, with legal representation. Guess who helped write the new rules? Yours truly. On a crisp fall morning, the neighborhood held a block-wide event. Porch Day. No sales. No banners. Just families sitting outside on their porches. Chatting. Laughing. Reclaiming space they had paid for. Owned. Built. My dad and I sat in our usual chairs, mugs of tea in hand. Neighbors waved. Some stopped by. Even the ones who used to walk past like we were invisible. An elderly white couple brought him peach preserves. The woman said softly, "We should have spoken up sooner." "I'm sorry." He nodded. Didn't say much. Just patted her hand and said, "Glad you're here now." Later that day, a young father from across the street came over with his little girl. "Mr. Waverly, my daughter's doing a school project. Can she ask you a question?" My dad smiled. "Of course." The girl asked, "Why do you always sit on your porch?" He looked at her, then at me, then out at the street where the leaves were falling slow. "Because sometimes, baby, just being seen is how you remind the world you're still here." I didn't cry right then, but when I got back to the guest room that night, I closed the door and let it come. Because I knew, this time, we didn't just win a fight. We made room. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.